Now, the only guys who are actually doing real reporting here are people like Glenn Greenwald, who's been completely on top of this story. In the post-game yesterday, we showed you him slicing and dicing Elliot Spitzer on MSNBC. And Spitzer never had an answer because Glenn is right. And he does it again today. And he talks about how the U.S. media just unquestioningly took the couple of minutes of edited, highly edited footage, aired it as if that's the only thing that happened on board. Now, I read that story. Then I watched Chris Matthews interview Barney Frank. And it was exactly what Glenn Greenwald was talking about. Now, this is really discouraging because Barney Frank had come out in the beginning. There were press reports saying that he was embarrassed as a Jew about what was happening in Gaza, right? And I gave him a lot of credit on Tuesday's program, and I said, hey, way to go and stick up for principles and et cetera, right? Well, I'm going to take all that back now, okay, because Chris Matthews and Barney Frank are about to have this disgusting exchange that is so far removed from what actually happened. Let's go to clip number 4.
No, first of all, we ought to be very clear that the blockade has not simply been an Israeli blockade. It's been an Israeli-Egyptian blockade. And I think that's very important because I do think the Israelis have a legitimate concern about being unfairly blamed and double standards. By the way, I don't remember quite so much worldwide outrage when the North Koreans sank a South Korean submarine and 46 people were killed. There were people now very upset about Israel in a much more ambiguous situation as to what could and should have happened. We had an unprovoked attack by North Korea on a South Korean submarine, 46 people killed, and a great deal of silence and equivocation. Look, you have this fundamental problem with Israel. For them, they gave up Gaza voluntarily. I was one of those who for a long time was arguing they should. What happened was Gaza was then occupied by a group of people who think Israel shouldn't exist and who are, in fact, on our terrorist list for good reason. Now, what we then have is a blockade, and the argument is, well, there were no weapons in this shipment, but a blockade that allows some things in and not others has to maintain control over the ports of entry so you can know what's in or not. Given that, I think it was irresponsible of the pro-Hamas people who organized this set of ships to go in there to do that, and obviously understood the potential for violence. That does not mean that everything the Israelis did in this situation was right. When military people are in a situation where they have to use force, as they had to do here, not everything will be done well. Not everything will be done correctly. I do agree it would be in Israel's interest to have an independent inquiry appointed by Israelis. By the way, the Israeli government, the Israeli judiciary has a very good record of holding the Israeli government to account. The Israeli Supreme Court has been much tougher on the Israeli government on security matters than the U.S. Supreme Court has been on our government, or than the French or the others have been. So I think it'd be in their interest to look at the specifics, but the context is relevant, that Egypt and Israel both said, look, we have terrorists running a piece of territory here. We do not trust them to be peaceful, and we're going to monitor what goes in. I agree things could be done better, but in this particular situation, I think it would be in everybody's interest for there to be an independent inquiry, which Israel has shown itself capable of having internally to figure out who did what when. But the basic context, I mean, I do believe, let's put it this way, if Hamas were in Canada, America would have a tougher blockade than Israel had.
You know, I hate it when I completely agree. I hate it, Congressman, when I completely agree with somebody, but I do. And the only question to add to that is, what's the international community, the smart people in Europe that are watching it, don't they see the movies we see? Don't they see in this particular situation the Israeli IDF guys getting beaten up on that ship?
It's over. Chris Matthews is an idiot. They gave him 1 minute of tape, 1 minute of edited tape. They don't show the hours. They don't show the shooting beforehand by the commandos. They're the ones boarding the ship illegally. They don't show you how those 9 people got shot in the head. They don't show you how 30 people got shot altogether. And Chris Matthews looks at that 1 minute and goes, can't the Europeans see it? Come on, it's on that 1 minute of tape. Obviously, these poor commandos were set upon. Now, you're not a journalist. You're not even close. You're embarrassing. Now, speaking of embarrassing, let's go to Barney Frank. He says, well, why aren't people outraged about North Korea? Who's not outraged by that? Everybody's outraged by North Korea. It's not as, quote-unquote, big of an issue right at this moment because Everybody agrees. There's nobody on the other side. Should North Korea have sunk their South Korean ship? Of course not. Who would be on the other side? Here, we have people saying on the other side, no, those people had it coming. They should have been shot, right? That's why it's not a debate on the North Korean issue. But why is he bringing up North Korea? Because he wants to distract you. Why is he bringing up Egypt? Because he wants to say, oh, and it's not just Israel, it's Egypt. And as Glenn Greenwald said on yesterday on MSNBC, so your best excuse is a dictatorial government in Egypt also does the blockade? That's not an excuse at all. Yeah, Egypt's also wrong. What's next? But the more important issues are, you see how he characterized the people on board. Those pro-Hamas supporters. And Hamas is a terrorist organization. So I guess those were pro-terrorists with the big clubs beating up on the poor commandos who had illegally raided the ship and started firing on board. What could they do? And he literally said they had to use force. Really? They had to board the ship in international waters? You know what was on the ship? 10,000 tons of humanitarian assistance. Wheelchairs, medicine, and food. They had to board the ship and shoot 30 people on board. And they said, don't worry, though. There should be a, quote, independent investigation internally done in Israel. It's as bad as it gets. This is American media. You see why people get frustrated? If you're outside the country and you don't know this, this is the crap we have to deal with. There's no other side. There's that side. Over and over and over again. Now, they're not done yet. They're going to give you one more piece of crap. Next clip.
You put military people in a position where they have to use force, and it's not going to be done perfectly. But on the fundamentals of the right to a blockade, again, we have to go back to the fact this doesn't happen in the West Bank. It happens in Gaza because a terrorist group that's opposed to Israel's very existence took physical control from the elected government at the time, the president, or they won the parliament, and have used it as a base for attacks.
You know what? I think when you let the Europeans judge Israel, you're not letting them be judged by a panel of their peers. It does seem a totally prejudicial situation.
And let me throw in one other thing about Turkey and Iran. Unfortunately, and getting sanctions against Iran is very important. I'm willing to show a little slack to the Chinese for that. But the Turks and the Brazilians just undermined our efforts to deal with Iran a couple of weeks ago. So Turkey can't blame this. And the Turks should not have been allowing themselves to be used in this situation by Hamas. But the Turks can't blame this for the fact that they've already been out of sync with us on Iranian sanctions.
Well, they got an Islamic government. Thank you so much. Islamist government, perhaps.
Now, that's it, man. I have 0% respect for Chris Matthews and Barney Frank. I'm going to go that far. I mean, it's maybe not surprising on Chris Matthews, but it is on Barney Frank. That was pure propaganda, ridiculous drivel. One, this doesn't happen in the West Bank, he says. Yeah, because you're not blockading the West Bank. I mean, hey, Chris, anybody at home? Do you know that there's a blockade of Gaza and not one of the West Bank? And then he says, oh, the Turks, they got used by Hamas here. So the Turks are also, they're also Muslim. Do you know that? Come on, obviously pro-terrorist sympathizers. And he said, you know how they undermined us with Iran. Are you kidding me? That might have been, out of all the things, that might have been the thing that pissed me off most. Why? Turkey and Brazil went and negotiated with Iran. This happened a little while ago. And they had tremendous success. I looked at all the details of that negotiation. I couldn't believe it. Iran gave almost exactly what the United States wanted. They gave in, and because it was a face-saving gesture. Oh, we're not giving in to America and the West. We're doing a deal with Turkey and Brazil, and then they'll join that deal, right? I was like, all right, great, mission accomplished. And I was blown away by the reaction the next day. The U.S. says, oh, well, we didn't make that deal. How dare you give us a deal that we totally agree with? No, you undermined our efforts. You know what that led me to believe? We don't want to deal with Iran. We don't want that deal. It's like Dick Cheney when Iran offered them a great deal in 2003 after the Iraq invasion. He said, we don't talk to evil. They don't want the deal with Iran. And then now they're saying that Turkey is pro-Hamas and is undermining our relationship and by actually getting the deal we wanted out of Iran. No. And then stupid Chris Matthews, moron Chris Matthews with, oh, Europeans, they're super biased against Israel. They can't be independent. Israel is more independent of an Israeli investigation where they killed 9 people than the Europeans. Pathetic. American media. Useless. Well, luckily, we're going to tear their ass down. in a couple of years, they're going to be crying and begging for work. I said, what happened? What happened? We had these big things like CNN and MSNBC. What happened? We had all this great stuff. What happened was you delivered crap day in and day out. You didn't do your job. And that's why you're going to lose your money when we're going to come to your house and we're going to take it. Okay? And then you go crying over spilt milk. Oh, what happened? It's because you sucked at your job. I'm a little worked up. All right. The AP, by the way, credit where credit is due. Yesterday I got on for a terrible article they wrote. Today, finally, somebody's thinking they reported, hey, maybe this deadly raid was a boon to Hamas. Of course it was. If you're not in favor of Hamas, then you should be totally against this raid because it's an enormous win for Hamas. Right now they're getting more support from all over the world, etc. They're getting sympathy. They're much more strengthened after this idiotic Israeli raid. If you're pro-Israel, you have to hate this raid. How stupid are you? All right, and then finally, I'm going to tweet this one out because it's great. And honestly, it has a lot of information I didn't know before. Rabbi Brant Rosen wrote a fantastic article about all the violence that Israel has already done against non-violent civilian protesters in the West Bank and Gaza Strip, and how they've been arrested, and he cites very specific instances of being shot at over and over again. Understand, this isn't a Jewish thing at all. Some of the best, toughest fighters we have on the side of reason and sense are Glenn Greenwald, M.J. Rosenberg, Rabbi Brant Rosen, and the list goes on and on and on. I'm going to send this article to you guys right now. Check it out. See what the real truth is. Young Turks.